Intel Macs. They're trash. They're so slow, use so much power that they double your electricity bill. They get hot as a grill when opening Safari, and the fans sound like a Boeing 747 taking off. They're bad and no one should be buying them in 2023. Or can they actually be a good value if the prices go down low enough? Well, I recently upgraded from my early 2013 15-inch MacBook Pro to this late 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro. And I think this is actually a pretty good computer for the price it's usually selling for online right now. So let's get the video started. And yes, this video is going to be a long one. So here are the timestamps for the individual sections of this video so you can skip to these parts if you don't want to watch the entire video. But first, some background info. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 3 years, Apple announced their switch from Intel processors to their own processors for their computers in June of 2020, and announced their first Apple Silicon Macs in November of the same year. Those Apple Silicon Macs with the M1 processor spread like wildfire and earned numerous amounts of praise and positive feedback. They were able to beat some of the most powerful Intel Macs in performance while drawing comparably minuscule amounts of power and staying cool even without the fan. These outstanding and incredible aspects of the M1 processor clearly show their advantage over Intel processors, which are hot and not very energy efficient. Over the next 2 years, Apple gradually switched their entire computer lineup to their own in-house processors and ditching Intel altogether, with the only model not receiving Apple Silicon processors yet being the Mac Pro, which is actually less powerful, at least in benchmarks, than a $500 Mac Mini. Apple updated the 16-inch MacBook Pro with a completely new design and introduced a new 14-inch model in October 2021, and was upgraded with the M2 Pro processor a year later. They have high refresh rate displays, much better thermals and performance, and also brought back ports such as the SD card slot and HDMI. These incredible upgrades basically made previous Intel Macs look trash, and as a result, their resale value plummeted faster than my self-esteem after taking the AP Chem exam. Which brings us back to this video's topic, the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro in 2023. A few weeks ago, I went on eBay just for fun, because, boredom, and looked up the prices for M1 MacBook Airs. They still go for like $600 minimum. Remember, the M1 Air was released in November 2020 for $999, and they still retain over 60% of their original value. I then looked up the prices for the late 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro, and you cannot imagine my reaction when I saw the prices. My jaw absolutely dropped when I saw that, holy shit, they're selling for $650 now. This computer costed $2,400 at launch in November 2019. It's only a year older than the M1 MacBook Air, yet it lost over 70% of its original value, now selling at less than a third of its launch price. Apple still sold this laptop brand new at $2,400 as recently as October 2021, and it's now only a small fraction of its original price. I can't imagine people who bought this computer must be really mad right now, but let's actually see if this is a good computer for 2023. Let's just assume a $700 price point, which is what these computers, 16-inch 2019 MacBook Pros, typically go for. I bought mine near the end of April for $779, which is a bit over market price, but it's in excellent condition, is from a reputable seller, and includes an 88-watt power supply too. And hey, I'm finally making a review video of this laptop that I promised to make over 3 years ago.
I'll probably visit the Apple Store and make a review episode about it later.
Gotta stay true to my words. Let's start with the design. Though this design might be a generation behind, it's still marvelous. Honestly, the newer design generation for the Apple Silicon MacBook Pros is a step back, reverting all the damage done by the 2016 to 2020 generation by making it thicker, tougher, and flatter, and reintroducing many ports, making it look like a combination of the earlier Retina MacBook Pros and the PowerBook G4s with the flat lids. This design generation's MacBooks have thinner designs, thinner display bezels, larger trackpads, and revised keyboards, and came in colors other than silver for the first time. It's a timeless design that will last for many years, just like how the MacBook Pros from 2008 still don't look that old externally. The aluminum build makes the computer durable and gives it a premium feel as well. The design is not that old either, since Apple only discontinued it in 2021, so it's still perfectly fine in 2023. The display is also beautiful to look at. Though it's very similar in dimensions to the 2012 to 2015 MacBook Pros, it has a 16-inch display due to thinner bezels, which makes it look much more modern. It is a retina display, so the pixels are so dense that your eyes cannot make out the individual pixels on the display, thanks to its 226 pixels per inch pixel density. Its non-standard 3072 by 1920 resolution is not quite 4K, but that isn't really necessary since increasing the pixel density on top of this retina display is practically pointless anyways. Videos and photos shine and pop out of this bright 500 nits display with support for P3 white color, making everything look even more colorful. No matter what you're doing on it, whether it be watching videos or editing photos, it sure is a brilliant display for nearly all situations. This computer does lack two major features included on the latest MacBook Pros, though: high refresh rate display and HDR support. The refresh rate on this 16-inch 2019 MacBook Pro is adjustable from 48Hz to 60Hz, but sadly, the display does not support 120Hz high refresh rate. And the 60Hz max refresh rate can really look a bit sluggish nowadays, with high refresh rate displays being so commonplace. It also doesn't have HDR support due to its peak brightness not being high enough, which is also a bummer. It's still a really nice screen for a 2019 device though, and even beats the displays for most brand new laptops sold today. Continuing on the topic of the hardware, what separates the 16-inch 2019 model and the 15-inch 2019 model are the different keyboards. The 15-inch model, released earlier in the year of 2019, was Apple's last attempt to make the disaster of a butterfly keyboard work, adding membranes and whatnot to protect the keys from dust ingression, but even that did not work, as the keys are just too loud and the key travel too small. And no matter what Apple does to the mechanism, it will still jam after a single dust particle enters it. So later in the year in 2019, Apple introduced the 16-inch MacBook Pro without a butterfly keyboard, and admitting that they were wrong for conceiving the idea for such a terrible keyboard in the first place. The revised scissor mechanisms switch back to the older and more reliable keyboard of the pre-Touch Bar MacBook Pros, making it so much more reliable than the butterfly keyboard. The key travel was greatly increased from nearly nothing, it almost feels like you're typing on a piece of paper, to a whole millimeter, and it's not nearly as loud and annoying to type on. The larger keycaps of the butterfly keyboard were retained, however, creating a perfect combination of the reliability of the previous scissor switch and the larger keys of the butterfly keyboard, which was like the only thing good about it. Apple also added back a physical escape key, which was previously a virtual button on the touch bar, and was just the dumbest thing ever. So the touch bar on the 16-inch model is a bit shorter as a result, but hey, it's better than not having a physical escape key. Overall, this keyboard is excellent and comfortable to type on, and I have no issues with it. I still don't like the touch bar though. Yeah, it can be useful if you do some tinkering around, but it's just a waste of space most of the time, and a gimmicky feature in my opinion. Nobody needs predictive text on a computer, which doesn't even work in Google Docs. And with traditional function keys, you can adjust the brightness and volume with a click of a single button, but with a touch bar, you either have to swipe a tiny slider or expand the controls, then click on virtual volume or brightness buttons, making simple actions unnecessarily complicated. Some people still like the touch bar. I personally don't, and I'm glad that Apple removed such a useless feature in the Apple Silicon MacBook Pros later. The trackpad is incredible though. If you can't tell already, the trackpad on this thing is huge, considerably bigger than even my entire phone. And unlike most other mainstream trackpads, you can click it anywhere. even at the top or in the middle because of the force touch technology, meaning this trackpad doesn't actually click, and it's basically just a giant glass surface you can tap on, and it gives you a convincingly real haptic feedback when you press on it, simulating a real click. And because it's force touch, it also has pressure sensitivity, so additional menus and actions are accessible when you press harder on the trackpad. Overall, to say this laptop's keyboard and trackpad is superb will be an understatement, and you will have no issues with it. In fact, it will feel like the Stone Age if you use this trackpad for a while and went back to a traditional diving board trackpad that only clicks near the bottom. The connectivity and ports isn't ideal though. It supports Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth 5.0, pretty standard for the time, but still good today. But physically, it only has 4 USB-C ports, a headphone jack, and nothing else. The 16-inch fixed a lot of the issues of the previous 15-inch model, such as the crappy keyboard and cooling system, but not the ports issue. The world isn't fully on USB-C just yet, so yes, you do have to use a dongle for pretty much everything, such as plugging in a USB drive or inserting an SD card. The fact that I have to plug in and unplug a dongle every time I want to use something does get annoying very quickly, and is a downgrade over my previous 2013 MacBook Pro and an annoyance compared to most laptops on the market today. Heck, even Apple admitted that they were wrong for only using USB-C and added the ports back in the M1 and M2 Pro MacBook Pros. It also charges over the USB-C ports, and it's pretty convenient that you can charge from the left and right side of the computer and in any port you want. However, that's still inferior to MagSafe, which allows you to plug in a laptop without even looking at where the port is, and it also prevents your computer from being yanked off the desk if the cord was dragged. Apple admitted that they were wrong for removing MagSafe too, because surprise, surprise, they also added them back to their latest laptops. So yes, the lack of ports on this machine really is an issue, especially for professionals. Glad Apple added them back though. But does the performance hold up against the much more efficient Apple Silicon processors? What I have here is the base model, equipped with a 2.6 GHz 6-core 9th gen Intel Core i7, the 19750H. 16GB of DDR4 2666 MHz memory, half terabyte of storage, and an AMD Radeon Pro 5300M with 4GB of graphics memory. It's very powerful for 2019 standards and still really good today. Even though it has the same processor as the early 2019 models, it does perform slightly faster due to the improved cooling system made possible by its slightly thicker design. So it doesn't thermal throttle nearly as much. The much improved cooling system also means that it doesn't get hot as often, and it's generally cool to the touch and silent when performing everyday tasks such as web browsing or word editing. It does still remind you that it's an Intel Mac though. After all, when you are video editing or something, then the fans do start to spin up and become audible. It scored an impressive 5726 points in Geekbench 6 multi-core. Impressive until you see that the M1 chip scores over 7,000 points for running on a fraction of the power. I mean, this performance isn't bad by any means, but it's just bizarre how powerful the Apple Silicon Macs are, especially given their tiny power consumption of like 15 watts. But even though it's hot garbage compared to Apple Silicon, it's still a hella powerful computer to use, and you'll have no problem performing tasks such as web browsing, word editing, etc. Its powerful 6-core i7 can also handle heavier tasks, such as 4K video editing and intense photo editing just fine too. You might have noticed that this is only the second ever 4K video on my channel, and the first one that did not literally take a whole day to export. Yeah, it's a real improvement over my 2013 MacBook Pro for sure. I mean, this computer is barely 3 years old, so actually it would be pretty bad if the performance isn't good. The AMD Radeon Pro 5300M graphics card is also really good for being a 3 years old mid-range mobile GPU, and a huge improvement over the 555X found in the early 2019 base models. It got 25,621 points in Geekbench 5 OpenCL, but benchmarks do not matter. Let's test it using real-life applications. It can export a 5-minute 4K video in about 3 minutes and 20 seconds, which is pretty good. I mean, it's definitely not as good as the M1 or M2 chip with dedicated video processing cores, but more than enough for semi-professional video editing. In a gaming benchmark of Unity in Heaven, it averaged at 57 frames per second, so it's also fairly good for running some games. So yes, the relatively good GPU also allows some light to moderate gaming on this thing. I know Macs are not meant to play games, and I wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to, you can get a pretty decent experience. So overall, the performance isn't quite on par with the new RAM 1 M2 Max, nor does it run as quietly or power efficiently, but it's still more than enough for everyday tasks and many professional workflows, and is comparable to or even better than most modern laptops in the same price range today. Now, the battery life. When the 16-inch MacBook Pro first launched, it got a lot of attention for the size of its battery. Whopping 100 watt-hours. The tear-downs and internal pictures clearly show that the battery could be bigger, but 100 watt-hours is the maximum size allowed by the TSA to be carried onto airplanes, so it is the biggest battery you can realistically put into a laptop. The battery life is good, but unfortunately the power-hungry Core i7 and Radeon Pro 5300M use up a lot of it, and the processor and GPU use even more of it if you upgrade it to the Core i9 or the 5500M. These powerful chips have huge TDPs and sips up a ton of power, so even though it has a huge battery, its battery life is maybe only half that of the Apple Silicon MacBooks. Again, its battery life isn't bad, but it's just, not outstanding compared to the 20-hour battery life of the M2 MacBook Air with a 15-watt TDP. This is a recurring theme throughout the video right now. This computer is good, but not quite as good when compared to Apple Silicon Macs. Still, it has a comparatively good battery life, better than its predecessor, and holds up well compared to modern Windows laptops. It can still easily last you an entire day without charging, and can be used for several hours when doing demanding tasks such as video editing. It should be noted that, just like all batteries, its battery do degrade over time, but since these 16-inch MacBook Pros aren't that old yet, the oldest of them you can find are only 3 years old, so yeah. They still retain most of their original capacity, with mine currently at 91% health, so it doesn't affect battery life noticeably as of now, but its battery life is good enough that I feel confident enough to unplug it and use it for hours without a charger nearby. You can't go wrong with this laptop's battery life. It's not as good as the M1 or M2 Max, but that doesn't mean it's bad. What is impressive about this machine and should be praised is its incredible speakers and microphones. It has a night and day difference between this and the earlier Retina MacBook Pros. It's also way better compared to other Windows laptops on the market today. I was taken back by how good the speakers sound when I pressed the power button and it played the boot chime. It's almost cinematic. The powerful 6-speaker array with dedicated subwoofers can produce room-filling sound and was a significant improvement over its predecessor speakers. It also gets really loud too, enough to be heard across the entire house. You can't get the full power and force of this speaker system until you've tried it in person, but here's a speaker comparison between this and the 2013 MacBook Pro that I upgraded from. Just listen to the bass. The microphones don't disappoint either. There's a 3-microphone array around the laptop that can record high-quality sound, more than enough for Zoom calls or video conferences. Apple claimed that you can record a podcast with it when it first came out, but though it's good, I highly doubt it's actually a professional microphone quality though. What does not stand out a lot on this MacBook, unlike the speakers and microphones, however, is the webcam. Yes, it was released in November 2019, but by then most laptops have already moved on to 1080p Full HD webcams. This is still stuck in the Iron Age with its teeny tiny 720p webcam, the same one Apple has been using since 2008, I think. The video processing got better, so it's not that terrible, and it's usable for video calls, but just why? Why is it still 720p in 2019? And just saying, Apple only started using Full HD 1080p webcams in 2021 with the M1 Pro MacBook Pro. And they needed to make a notch to make it fit. Come on Apple, it's not that hard. Here's a sample of the microphone and webcam quality, with the microphone being unusually good and the webcam being unusually bad. This is the microphone and webcam quality of the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro. The webcam is still 720p for some reason, but at least the processing got better, I guess. This is what the other side would hear and see if you're on video call or something. Let me know in the comments. Is this quality sufficient for 2023? And now, just a small note on repairability. Apple has been gradually scaling back on the repairability of their products for years now, from soldering down components to locking parts to individual computers and serial numbers. Before 2012, MacBooks were actually very repairable, just 10 regular screws, and you'll have access to the RAM, hard drive, optical drive, and battery, all of which are replaceable and upgradable by the user. There are even repair manuals on Apple's website. You don't see that very often anymore. After the Retina MacBook Pro was introduced, however, many components were soldered down to the logic board, with the only user-accessible component being the SSD. But when Apple introduced the Touch Bar MacBook Pro in 2016, even that was gone, and everything was soldered down to the logic board. So if you are looking to purchase any post-2016 MacBook, make sure you pick the correct configuration up front, because it's impossible to replace later on. The Touch ID button, like iPhones, is paired to a serial number of individual devices, so you can't just replace the power button by yourself, or you'll lose Touch ID. The battery is also glued down and requires an immense amount of adhesive remover to replace. The only easily repairable components in this computer are the trackpad and ports, which is interesting because you would expect Apple to solder all the USB-C ports to the board like other laptop manufacturers, but no, the individual ports are actually replaceable. So you don't have to replace the whole logic board if a singular port breaks. But that's about it as for repairability. Other than that, this laptop isn't very upgradable, and nothing can be upgraded without replacing the entire board. But most importantly, despite how good this laptop is for only $700, is it actually a safe decision to get an Intel Mac in 2023? Well, it depends. For about the same price as a used base model M1 MacBook Air, maybe a bit more expensive than that, they both have their own pros and cons. So it all depends on personal needs and personal preference. The M1 MacBook Air delivers blazing fast performance and an insanely long battery life in a small and light package, and it basically never overheats. But the display is a bit small, and it only has 8GB of RAM and 256GB of SSD for the base model, which will probably prove to be a limitation in the near future. On the other hand, the base model 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro gives you a large and brilliant display and higher specs on paper with double memory and storage. But the Intel processor, while powerful, does produce a lot of heat and suck up a lot of power, so the battery life is good, but nowhere near the level of an M1 Mac. And Apple is also slowly but surely abandoning Intel Macs, and they are a slowly dying breed, so future software support could be an issue. The 16-inch MacBook Pro, however, can natively run x86 Windows, so if you absolutely need Windows for some reason, like running Windows programs or occasional gaming, then the MacBook Pro is probably the better choice. It also depends on what you need a MacBook for $700 for. Honestly, for most people, a used M1 MacBook Air is probably the way to go due to its battery life, silent operations, and sleek design, and it'll probably age better due to having an Apple Silicon processor. But if you want to open a lot of apps at the same time, have a professional workflow, needs more than 256GB of storage, wants a bigger display and speaker to consume content on, or need Windows for some reason, then go for the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro. It's still really good. It's still insane to me that I'm recommending people to buy an Intel-based MacBook right now. But if the prices are low enough, which they definitely are right now, then they aren't just hot garbage in 2023 and are worth it in some situations. In the end, with the price of Intel Macs being so low, in some cases, buying an Intel Mac is actually a good financial decision and a sensible choice, and can even be a good value. Intel Macs are definitely going away, and it's not for everyone, but they can still be a good purchase depending on what you need from a $700 MacBook, especially the 16-inch 2019 MacBook Pro. It's still insane to me how a computer can just lose 70% of its value in 3 years. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I know this is a long video, so if you made it all the way to the end, maybe give it a like and subscribe for more tech content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!